Hello everybody, my name's Colin D. Ellis and welcome to the Culture and Coffee podcast, where I discuss a news story or a topic of workplace culture and some practical things that you can do over the time it takes to drink a cup of coffee. So let's get into today's episode. Welcome everybody to another episode of the Culture and Coffee podcast for Monday the 30th of October 2023, the day before the most ridiculous day of the year, Halloween. Seems to be treated as a bit of a holiday in some states. I was in the US a couple of weeks ago and people had already decorated their houses. I suppose it's a bit like Christmas in the UK where everyone decorates their house like at the end of November or whatever. But if, Halloween's your thing, I hope you have a great night, whatever. Watch a scary movie. Horror's not top of my genres for movies, but I can never watch Jaws ever again, especially now, got a base in Australia, can't do that, definitely never get in the sea. I like The Fog, that was a good movie, that was a book by James Herbert, I think, but Wolf Creek is one of the most terrifying films I've ever seen, never watched that again. Anyway, didn't mean to start with the podcast talking about horror. There's a bunch of you listening going, oh yeah, talking of horror stories, let's get on to my culture. And of course, this is the time of year where organizations should really be looking at themselves and going, yeah, there's a bunch of things we need to sort out. And there's a blog that I haven't written yet. I'm just researching about the fallacy of people choosing not to spend money on culture and staff development, which is the most ludicrous thing to do. And as a former senior manager, it happened in organizations I worked in teams I worked in, where discretionary spend got pulled for the things that could actually make a difference, which is creating a great environment where people are happy to come to work because, it improves productivity, and growing people, which increases retention and reduces attrition, and actually gives people a pathway and they want to stay, and that adds to the culture, and that's how we achieve results. Anyway, I'll write that blog, promise. But today I'm going to talk about burnout, because I've talked to a few people about this recently, and in different countries and in different continents. So in Australia, in Europe, and in North America. And this, issue of burnout keeps coming up, and burnout rates are increasing. It was reported in 2020 that people felt completely used up. Right, 60% of people said that they felt completely used up at the end of the day. That feeling where you've just got nothing left in the tank, and yet you still manage to look at your phone. That feeling? Where you just lay on the sofa. My daughter has got a part-time job, and she came in, she was absolutely exhausted and was lay on the sofa, and yet still had the strength to hold her iPad at arm's length. She's like, I'm so tired. I'm like, yeah, but not your arms, right? So 60% in 2020 said 60% of people said they felt completely burnt out, used up at the end of the day. Last year, that was 72%. So almost 3/4 of the people feel completely burnt out. And of course, the pandemic worsened things. Of course it did. Because we didn't get much exercise for a while there. We weren't allowed out, that's why. There was a lot of stress in the world, which has eased a little bit, but not much. The news is still pretty horrible as I'm recording this. There was a lot of fear, and we had this opportunity to take back control a little bit of particularly of technology, which I'm going to talk about, which is a key contributor to the burnout that we feel. So what, so what's the issue? I mean, other than your own mental and physical health, which is the most important thing, it's also bad for business. It's really bad for business. But right, I'm going to talk about I want to talk about the negatives here, and the negative of I want to talk about the positives of it. And the positive of it is the fact that kind of when organizations or when they create culture that, people feel a sense of connection to, when they create culture where people help each other to not feel burnt out, then you get all of the gains, increased productivity, increased engagement, better results, improved profitability, all of these things. And a vibrant culture actually reduces burnout by 66%. So if you and your teammates are feeling burnt out, then actually the thing to do is to stop work, which always feels counterproductive. And there's always a leader go, no, you got to keep going, foot to the, pedal to the floor. Like that's, kind of the thing that you need to do. But that just increases burnout. And if you're a senior leader, you have to role model what great looks like. It's the biggest challenge. Toby Lutker is the CEO of Spotify back in December 2019 now, so it's almost 3 years ago. So he talked about the fact on Twitter, it's never X, Twitter, that he doesn't overwork, he never feels burnt out, he's present with his family at 5:30 p.m. every evening. And the criticism we got at the time was, it's very easy for you as a millionaire and blah, blah, blah. It's really not. It's really not, because, one of the things that he recognizes is that if he doesn't set the tone, then people will just naturally create these really bad habits, these really poor ways of working. And I talked on previous podcasts about how some leaders just haven't created that environment. And what it does is it allows other people to, kind of, I don't know, put undue pressure, I suppose, on people to overwork. Do you feel that? Do you feel that undue pressure to overwork? I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. And so, Toby Lutker said there's 5 creative hours in every day. I think he said this. There's 5 creative hours in everybody's day. All I ask is that 4 of those are channeled into the company. And I loved that. For me, that was such a great way to frame productive work. Now, most of you, well, not most of you, there'll be some of you on listening to this podcast and only do 60 hours a week, which is, so that's your problem. Like, you've created that problem, to be fair. And so I'll talk a little bit about that. There'll be some of you who of course, have to work all of the hours for not much money. And as someone who's been there myself in my early career, I understand. But I want to give you a sense of hope in this podcast. You can't necessarily change some of the things around you. You just have to keep working hard at it. And you have to find time to work on yourself. And you have to come at life with a sense of kind of positivity and optimism. And I can't tell you to be positive, and I can't tell you to be optimistic. You have to find those moments. Anyway, talk about that as well. So I went, I looked for some research and said, okay, well, ultimately burnout leads to a decrease in well-being. So, kind of what when you look at employee well-being, now you can be an athlete on a sports team. You could be a football player, you could be a cricketer, you could work in an office, you could work in a field, you can work anywhere. So when I talk about employee, it's someone who's employed by another entity. It also works for self-employed people as well. But employee well-being is dependent on 3 key factors. So this is Hammer. Hammer did this. Hammer, there you go, on the day before Halloween, Hammer House of Horror, which was very popular. Oh, there's another thing. I remember my dad used to let us stay up, going slight tangent here. My dad used to let us stay up on a Saturday night to watch Match of the Day. And Match of the Day in the UK used to be, it's like a football show where they do highlights of all of the games. And as a kid, used to stay up for Match of the Day. It was awesome. It was great. But right before Match of the Day, for whatever reason, there was a horror show called Hammer House of Horror. So Dad would let us stay up for the football. So you had all of these, family shows like Bruce Forsyth's Generation Game, and it's probably something hosted by Terry Wogan, like Blankety Blank or something like that. Then you would have the news. Then there would be, Hammer House of Horror. And I distinctly remember the house that bled to death. And it's just awful, and didn't sleep a wink that now, even though Everton probably won. It was the one time of the season when they won. Anyway, so employee well-being, research by Hammer. So decrease the demands of work, increase employee control of how, when, and where they work, and improve social support. So I factored all of those into the things that you need to think about and that the kind of reasons why you feel burnt out at work. And so, I kind of 1, 2, 3, 4. I listed 5 things. Why do you feel burnt out at work? So, I spent all afternoon last week on, I think it was Thursday, researching this. So the reasons why you feel burnt out at work. So the first reason is there's a real lack of clarity on what's important. And I'm specifically talking about work here. And for most people, work is the main reason they feel burnt out. All right. So there's a lack of clarity on what's important, kind of what are those priorities, which means that someone in a leadership position hasn't said, this is number 1, this is number 2, this is number 3. And without that, you end up feeling scattered. Right? You end up like, well, I don't know what's the most important thing to do. And this is when we start jumping around. When we don't have the clarity on what's important, when everything's a number 1 priority, we jump around, and not in a good House of Pain way. Jump around, jump up and get around. My friend Monique was telling me last week that she did a session recently. She got everyone to sing that song, which would be an awesome way to start a conference. But so you need that clarity, because when you have that clarity, you're able then to plan your days. You're able to say, right, if that writing that report is the most important thing, then I need to set time aside the next day to be able to do that. If visiting the nutritionist is the most important thing, then I need to set time aside to do that. And often what we do is we fall into doing the thing that feels most comfortable. And it's the same for everybody. I felt burnt out recently, and the thing that I did to ease the burnout was to go for a run. And you'd be really surprised, but when I came back, I didn't feel any less burnt out. In fact, I felt more, but I felt absolutely shattered. But that was just a thing that was comfortable. The reason that I felt burnout, there's lots of things going on in kind of my world right now. And if I'd have dealt with one of those other things, it would have eased that sense of pressure, of stress. But no, I chose to do the thing that I was comfortable with. So that lack of clarity of priorities really has an impact on how you're able to think about planning your day. Now, I always say, for those of you who listened to podcasts before, the last thing you should do of an evening is to, kind of write down what are the 3 things I need to get done the next day. And if you don't do anything else, you do those 3 things and you plan them in. And if you have to block time out, if you work in an office environment, you do that. Otherwise, you kind of carve out time in your day and recognize when you need to do it and get it done. If you need clarification on it, then you need to ask your boss, what do you want me to do first? And so I spoke to someone a couple of weeks ago. They were like, oh, I can't often get hold of my boss. What should I do in that scenario? I was like, well, you just drop them an email and say, hey, Colin, just to let you know, I consider these to be the 3 most important things, or whatever it is for you, 2 most important things. So I'm going to work on these first. If this is not right, please drop me a message or give me a call. Right. So if you can't get that clarification from them, then you're just going to pose it to them and say, this is what I'm working on. And all of a sudden you get that sense of purpose. Okay, I know what the most important thing is. I know what I need to do. Let's do that. Now that brings me to the second one, right? The second thing that I wrote down is that you need to get some proper rest. Right, so the second reason that you feel burnt out at work is you've got a bunch of bad habits. And in my experience, most people know that these habits exist, but they don't, come back to the first one, prioritize addressing them. Now, one of the bad habits that people have is they don't put themselves to bed early enough. Doesn't sound like your parents here. You really should get to bed a little bit earlier. But you need to put yourself to bed at a reasonable hour. You need to look after your body. You need to get some exercise, even if it's just a little walk, get some fresh air, whatever exercise looks like for you in your circumstances. You need to eat well. You need to lay off the booze during the week if you can. I had a guy say to me once, he was just like, but booze is the thing that keeps me going. And I was like, yeah, it's not really helping though. It's not going to make you feel great about yourself. So if you can, I would try my best to get to Friday and be like, oh, and then use it as a reward, which is also a bad habit, I suppose. But yeah, you need to look after yourself. You need to look after your body. You need to be able to wake up with that kind of fresh sense of, all right, I know what I've got to do, and I'm going to get on and do it. When you feel burnt out, you don't have that clarity of thought. Now, extreme burnout, as I read, can take 6 weeks to overcome. 6 weeks. So you don't ever want to get to that point, right? And so you do need to look at your habits. You do need to take a break in the evenings and the weekends. It is unhealthy not to stop. You need to put your phone and your tablet away. You need to lock your laptop in a drawer, put your phone on flight mode. You need, like, the recommended advice, right, is that between 45 and 60 minutes before you go to bed, no screens, and that includes TV. Now, I'm not a big TV watcher, so I'm okay with that. I watch a lot of sport at the weekend, but I don't generally watch much TV. But like everybody else, I can kind of go down a bit of a rabbit hole, particularly on work during the week. And I have to stop, and I generally set myself a time. I'm like, right, I'm going to stop at this time. And I've got a number of books on the go. If you don't like reading books, you listen to audio books. You could listen to podcasts. But you know, what scientists recommend is you actually disconnect completely. There are some people, there's people who've always got their AirPods in or always got headphones in. It's like, take them out. You know, like, if you go for a run, you don't have to listen to anything, you know. You don't have to. Unless you need music to keep you going, just listen to the birds. Like I did this morning. Lovely run this morning. Listen to the birds and the traffic. All right. So there was two things. There was birds and there was traffic. But you don't have to be constantly entertained. Right. The boredom is a good thing, believe it or not. So another bad habit is when we procrastinate, we don't focus on the things that we need to actually get done. Instead, what we do, we procrastinate and we'll work on the thing that's most comfortable. So I already mentioned that. But if you get that clarity on the priorities, that should address that. And then the first thing you're going to do when you wake up in the morning is just take action. Don't have your phone in your bedroom either. That's not good for you, but you know that. I feel like I've said this before. So why haven't you changed your habits? I've said this before. What's going on? Why is your phone still in your bedroom? Buy an alarm clock. So yeah, all right. I'll stop going on about the bad habit. You got some bad habits, right? You don't want to get into that cycle of procrastination. Oh yeah, sorry. The other thing I was going to say about kind of taking a rest, having a rest. So you want to make sure that you, as much as you possibly can, you're not working evenings and weekends. You don't have to wear busyness as a badge of honor, and this means that you have to make some different decisions. All right. So the third thing is you make bad decisions at work. You get stuck into writing long emails that you then copy everybody into. You accept invitations from meetings that you can add no value to. You agree to go to a meeting for an hour when you're only needed for 10 minutes, 15 minutes. You allow people to talk at you instead of focusing on the things that you need to get done. You don't block out time for the work that you need to do. Don't make it a priority. So you need to take control back of these things. You really, really do. You need to be like, right, so that time is for this, that time is for this. If people, listen, there's a bunch of oxygen thieves out there who will gladly talk your ears off and it's of no value to you. Now, I'm not talking about being a bad teammate. I'll come to that next. Because you do need to make time to be a good teammate. But when someone comes up, let's say you're back in the office, let's say you're out training and someone goes, oh, how was your weekend? And you're like, oh yeah, it was really good, thanks. Oh, right. What did you get up to? You don't have to have that conversation, right? You can say, hey, listen, I don't want to be rude, but I've really got to do this now. Let me come and find you later on. We can have a chat. All right. And then you have to go and do it, right? Can't just palm off. Like, if you don't want to talk to him, just say, hey, listen, I'm really sorry. I just don't want to talk to you right now. Yeah, we're losing the ability to be honest. Like, no is a complete sentence. Colin, can you do this for me, please? No, I'm sorry, I can't. It's okay just to leave that there. Most people would send an email, waffling about why they couldn't do it. So yes. So you need to make sure that you're kind of really well organized in whatever work looks like for you. I was speaking to an athlete a few weeks ago in Holland, and they were saying that their days just don't feel structured. I'm like, but you could do that. You could work with your coach to structure your days in a way where you get the maximum out of your physical and mental abilities, right? The things that you need to work on. There was a number of things that they needed to work on. So take control back. And a big part of that is making sure that you've got the support of the people around you. And there needs to be that agreement on how you work together when, relating back to that research from Hammer, in kind of increasing employee control about how, when and where work gets done. So you have to agree the culture. I mean, broken record here, but it's true. The organizations that succeed are the ones that actually bring people together to agree the culture. They make it a priority. And all of a sudden then what you've got is support from people. You don't feel burnt out because people will stand up and take work off you. They'll take responsibility. They'll say, hey, listen, if you're struggling, let me know. We'll all pitch in. That doesn't just happen by chance. It happens when you agree what it means to be a good team. Right? And a part of that is being able to take breaks with those people. It's kind of mixing socially so you can increase those bonds that you have. As I've said, human connection drives collaboration. It does. And working together is not just about getting the work done. It's also about looking after each other. It's also about creating that sense of safety. It's helping each other to remove distractions. It's challenging each other. It's being able to disagree, but in a way that isn't toxic. That in a way that helps you all get better at what you do, including, kind of goal achievements. So it's really important. But it's also important that I make the point here as well, is if you face undue pressure from an individual or individuals, then that's something that you perhaps may need to report. Or you may need to escalate. Because definitely one of the reasons for burnout is when you're working for a really bad manager. They're not leaders, these people. They're really bad managers. And that has to be fed back to the powers that be. There was someone who said, oh, well, I can't change my boss and he's not going anywhere. What should I do? And I'm like, well, you just got to show up, be the best version of you. You and your team need to agree how you're going to get work done. Sometimes it happens despite the boss, not that I was encouraging her to do that. It's like, and if he's not prepared to change who he is, then at some stage you're going to have a decision to make. And of course, it's the organization's fault for not putting the emphasis on, kind of creating safe workplace cultures where people can bring the best of themselves and they challenge those brilliant jerks that undermine and hold the culture back. And then the last thing on my list here is there's no time for creativity, celebration, or reflection. There's no time. So you constantly feel like you're on the hamster wheel. Creativity is brilliant, culture workshop coming up. And on the second day, half of the day, we just spend coming up with ideas. And honestly, people are just so grateful for the opportunity and they come up with just the best ideas. Cracking stuff. And people are like, oh, we should put these into action. All of a sudden, they've got this real sense of intention about wanting to improve stuff and wanting to get better. It's absolutely brilliant. But for most people, when you feel burnt out, you haven't made the time. You haven't made the time. And people always say, I haven't got the time. You have got loads of time. You just waste it in back-to-back meetings. You're not saying, it's the easiest thing to do is to put in an hour of creative thinking and work, kind of time where you can just challenge some, existing norms that are holding the culture back. Also making sure you celebrate, even if it's someone's birthday or, somebody achieves something somewhere, just stop. Get off that hamster wheel and do something slightly different. Kind of have a little reflection session and ask yourselves, all right, what have we done well this week? What could we improve on? What's one idea that we've got for the future? All these things are really, really simple. You know, the teams that I work with, they put them into practice. Their engagement goes up, their productivity goes up. They haven't got an army of consultants in the office telling them, you know, the things that they already know. They're actually being empowered through the agreements that they've made with each other to do this stuff for themselves. And at that point, what you get is this sense of togetherness where everybody is helping everybody else with their physical health, their mental health, with the work that needs to get done, such that everybody can be productive, which leads to happiness, and everyone's leading their best lives. Wouldn't that be better than feeling burnt out? Hope you've enjoyed today's podcast. Ta-ra for now. Thanks for listening to today's podcast. If you'd like to find out more about how I can help you transform the culture of your team, head to my website at www.colindellis.com.